Hi, guys. Welcome to Partially Impartial. We had to change our name a little bit to stay on YouTube's good side because there's a few key words that they don't like. And so we haven't really been getting too much exposure. So we decided to give this new name a try to see if we could reach a broader audience. I'm really glad that our listeners could tune into our show. We're doing this not at nighttime, we're doing this during the daytime. I'm still cracking a beer, though. So doesn't change that for me, but you'll be glad you tuned in. We got a lot of good stuff for you today. We actually have one of CJ's friends on again from Indiana. He's actually an EMT out there, so we're hoping we can get a lot of useful insights from him. Thanks for joining us tonight, Ian, or today.
Oh, no problem, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I hope it's a really good conversation. So, one of the first things I like to ask all our guests is, because we've been in this for quite a while. What was your first reaction when you first started hearing about this global pandemic or this particular virus? Did you think it was just something that was people were just putting too much focus on? The government was just trying to scare everyone, or did you see it turning into what it is today?
To be perfectly honest, at first I kind of thought it was a little bit of a joke. It didn't seem like it was going to be that serious, and then my views on that quickly changed. Though it definitely ramped up and got a lot more serious than anything I expected, and a lot of the old timers that have been around doing this for 15, 20 years, they talking to them, they even say that this is the first time in their careers that they've actually been scared of something that's come around like this.
So, do you feel like you had somewhat of like an early I mean, being the fact that you're in the medical field, were you hearing a lot of other people talk about this?
Yeah, we were talking about it a little bit, but I mean, it was just kind of, you know, like I said, we didn't really take it as serious as it should have been. We saw it kind of coming down the pipeline, but we legitimately thought it was just going to be like another flu kind of thing. Um, it we weren't expecting to see it be so prevalent or it start passing around as quickly as it did.
How how's the response like just out there, um, where you're at in Indiana? Was it a like a real quick jump to it? Everybody, stay at home, wear masks, or and take it seriously, or was it just kind of a really laxed approach on it?
People kind of, I mean, when they first put the quarantine in place, people actually listened to it pretty quick and started taking it serious the way that it should have been. Um, you know, uh, we haven't had a whole lot of the people fighting it, where people are out protesting and stuff. And even still today, you go to the store and whatnot. A lot of stores won't let you in without the mask, even though it's kind of optional and stuff. And even at the stores where you know they don't force you to wear a mask, people are still out here wearing them like you should be.
And do you guys have like shields and stuff when you go into the grocery store, like shielding the registers and whatnot?
Oh yeah, we have all that and stuff going on too.
Out of curiosity, is Indiana like a more Democratic or a more Republic state?
Indiana is super conservative. We're kind of set in the old ways. Like Indiana was a dry state up until about last year, kind of deal. Like, and even now, you can't buy beer on Sundays except for like this small couple hour window. So
Yeah, because from what I've seen, it seems like the whole Democratic versus Republican thing seems to be playing a pretty big role in this. It's unfortunate, but it seems like whenever a new topic comes down the pipeline, it kind of gets filtered into these two different categories of Democratic versus Republican. Now it seems like the Republican side is more on, we need to open the economy and even going as far as saying like the whole thing's not dangerous, or there's levels to it. Obviously, there's some more moderate Republicans and there's some more extreme Republicans, and then of course on the Democratic side, they're saying we need to keep the economy closed and we need to worry much more about the health impacts. Where do you kind of stand on that spectrum?
I mean, for me, I'm not a huge political person. personally, as far as the government and stuff goes, I don't really trust either party. I think everybody's got their own agenda. But, the way that I've been kind of seeing it is it seems like if you wear a mask, you're a liberal. And if you're not wearing a mask, you're conservative. And, I just, I don't think it's as simple as that,
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that it turns into that kind of thing, because there's so much of our population is identified with these certain groups, and by identified I mean pretty much, it seems like to me the identification comes when you start talking shit on the other side. So obviously, if you're a Republican and you are kind of in that stream of information, then you don't want to be seen wearing a mask because you've been talking shit on that other side. So now it's like, even the simple act of just wearing a mask, which is just protecting yourself, it's almost like you said, it's like a liberal thing to do, which is just really unfortunate in the world that we're in. And it really hinders our response to this virus as a whole. Real quick, just looking at Indiana's numbers here, looks like you guys have seen quite a bit of it. I'm not sure how big. I actually don't even really know where Indiana is on the map, to be honest with you.
Right between Michigan and Illinois, right below Lake Michigan. Yeah, and where I'm at, I'm in northwestern Indiana, so I'm about 30 minutes outside of Illinois and about 30 minutes outside of Michigan as well. So
do things look like they're kind of, here in Utah, things are starting to do a really slow open. There's a lot of things that are not open, but I think they're kind of telling the population, look, we're opening this and this. And I think it's kind of giving people hope. Or is it the same story in Indiana, kind of just this slow opening?
Yeah, what they're kind of doing is they're doing a couple stages throughout the month. Basically, the first stage, they're starting to reopen, more essential stuff where, you can go and get like, maybe not essential for like a haircut, but now, you can go see your barber and stuff, but like you can't go to the gym until I think the 24th, so they're kind of doing that. And I think that's kind of the smarter way to go is, start easing back into it.
I was going to say, there just needs to be, when it comes down to a soft opening, like, people just need to continue to take it seriously, and it's like proceed with caution type deal. Like, you still need to see masks, you still need to see, be cautious about washing your hands and just keeping sanitary and keeping, social distancing and whatnot. And I feel like if everybody could stick to that, then we wouldn't have to worry about, like, what's going to happen, 3-4 weeks from now when we have a second outbreak and shit starts hitting the fan.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I'm kind of worried about is the second wave. One thing that I've kind of noticed in the medical field is that 9 times out of 10, the second wave or the second time something comes back, it's normally much worse. An example that I use is like anaphylaxis. If you have an allergic reaction to something, the first time normally isn't that bad. You can knock it down with like Epi or Benadryl or something like that. But if a couple hours later, if that reaction comes back, that's normally the one that'll kill you. And so that's what I'm starting to get worried about.
Why is that anyway? With that specific example, does it something change in your body? Why is the second time worse than the first?
Most of the time it's because either A, the drugs are in your system already, so we can't necessarily give you more of it, or just because your body's already been fighting it, and so it's already used up what it's been, what it needs to fight it off. So at that point, your reserves are already depleted, and it just, it seems to set in much quicker, and it's just, it's a lot more of an extreme result.
That's pretty fascinating. See, I asked you that question because I hope that it would draw some parallels to this whole second case or a second outbreak that we're likely to see, and it turns out to be like pretty much the same thing. It's basically because people are tired of this already. They want it to be over. They're hoping that it is over. They're optimistic about it, and that's kind of like CJ talked about in previous shows. It's lowering the fear factor, and the fear factor has kind of been what's kept us safe. And so we're kind of running out of our reserves. The government's already handed out so much money. Our medical system's already been pretty stretched, though I feel we've gotten quite a good lid on that. But the second one, if it comes, will probably be right when we think it's turning around and it's gone, and our reserves are already really emptied at that point. And so yeah, I think that could really be what we see in this second case. So I think let's go ahead and jump over to the numbers here, because we are seeing kind of a slowdown here in every place that's had it. And it was really intense for a while. Like, for instance, New York is a perfect example, because it was really, really bad in New York for a while, and they really locked things down. And then since then, we have actually seen a drastic decrease. And unfortunately, it's decreased in New York, but it's actually kind of increased in some other states. So I'm looking at the daily new cases in United States, and it's almost been flat since April 3rd. So we've been seeing about 30,000 cases a day in the U.S. since April 3rd. Just recently, we had a 25,000 and 27,000, 21,000. So it may be trending down a little bit. But I mean, I'm hearing like Connecticut is talking about really starting to open things up. So I mean, we have proven that we can slow this thing down, which I kind of, because I was looking into a lot about the virus before it really broke out. And I was kind of worried that, first of all, we wouldn't really shut things down enough to stop it. Or even if we did, it wouldn't really be enough to make a huge difference. And man, I gotta say, we've had a pretty good response so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of, I mean, the quarantine and stuff, I think definitely was the right way to go. I know a lot of people were kind of pissed off about it, but it's just, it's something that we haven't seen. I know that they say that, the virus itself has been around for a while, but the particular strains that we're seeing right now are new, but with it being something new and something that you're not prepared for, or something that you don't have experience with, I mean, you got to go the cautious route with it. If you're just nothing, I mean, you're going to get caught with your pants down, and that's one of the worst things you can do for any type of situation, really.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, it's like almost a general, like I said, it's like a proceed with caution type deal. Like, if everybody cooperates and everybody sticks to wearing masks when you're going out, and you don't have to wear a mask in your car, you don't have to wear a mask at home, and just as you're out grocery shopping, make sure you wash your hands, and just general sanitation. I mean, most people avoid getting the flu and avoid getting sick, and that's even without getting a flu shot or getting any sort of vaccine. So if the general public was to just stick together and actually cooperate, then I don't think we would have to worry about any sort of second outbreak. But with the current lax on the way things are right now, and just looking at global cases, just like yesterday, we had 99,000 global, so almost 100,000 again. And I mean, I don't see it laxing very, very much longer. I mean, we're going to have this flattened curve where we're going to see around 30,000, but I personally think, just with the stubbornness of the American people and how quickly they just want a quote unquote regular life, then we're definitely going to start seeing numbers in 40,000 within the next couple months.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, one thing I want to say real quick is, you keep bringing up like the sanitation and stuff, is like, the fact that people are actually starting to take that a little bit seriously and start washing their hands more often and stuff. It makes me wonder how like gross everybody was prior to this. Like that's so bad. but it's just, it's just, I wish everybody could just do their part. I feel like, Americans are a little bit, they like to be blissfully ignorant of, some of the ugly truths that are really going on, rather if that's just like, like people keep saying, oh, we decided that, it's over and it's no longer a concern. So that's how it is, and I, that's not how it works.
And I feel like this whole thing started out with a pretty big group of just biased people to begin with, because when the virus was first starting to like emerge into the mainstream media and kind of popular culture. I mean, I'm on Facebook quite a bit, and so I get to kind of see what the feel is, outside of the media. Just what are people thinking about it? And I feel like the majority of people were saying, "Oh, the government's trying to trick you. Don't fall for it. Don't be dumb. Everyone's a sheep who believes in this." And that's where they started. So, and then as it progressed, it's like, wait, I already decided that you're a sheep if you believe in this. So now that it's a real thing, I'm not going to be a sheep. I'm not going to believe in it. And so they kind of started there, and then now they just really want this to end. So, and I gotta say, I kind of observe emotions a lot, and being right or wrong is one of the most powerful and influential drivers in the human mind. And even if it's something you said months ago, you still want to be right about your initial thing, especially if you talk shit on it, because that means you're
You have to back
invested.
it up.
You're really invested in being right.
Yep.
And this kind of reminds me of what you posted the other day, CJ. You made a post that on our page, basically saying, I was talking about the stimulus, and it said, "Give us a thumbs up if you think that there should be another 1,200. Give us a heart if you think it should be $2,000 a month for 6 months. Give us a wow face if you're just fascinated about all the money, or give us an angry face if you just want the economy to open up." And kind of surprisingly, we got majority of angry faces. We got 110 angry faces on this page, more than twice of anything else. So that's kind of
I've never got that many angry faces on anything I've ever posted on Facebook.
I tell you, that's the way to get a reaction on Facebook, is you got to be controversial.
I just had a feeling. Even just this morning, it's passed, in the House. So now they got to worry about the Senate, or passing the Senate, got to worry about the House. I can't remember what direction it goes. But anyways, like now we're going to start hearing about it a lot more. And I guarantee when they start sending out some sort of next sort of stimulus package, anybody that was like, yeah, I just want the economy to be over, they're definitely going to take that check happily.
Yeah, that's, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think everybody deserves it, but I feel like that's kind of a little, BS, like Jerrick was saying, is that, you talk shit on it and stuff, but at the same time, you have no problem cashing the check and, everything else. And don't get me wrong. I mean, anybody walks up, even if I don't like it, you want to offer me $1,200. I mean, sure, man, I'll shake your hand afterwards too.
Oh yeah, that's something we've said on the show before. If the government's handing out money, you take it because everyone else is taking it. So if you don't take it, then you're getting the downside, which is obviously the devaluation of the dollar as they print all this money. And if you weren't to take that money, then you would just get the downside and not the upside. So, and that's how all the corporations are looking at it too, with the PPP programs, and basically everyone's just jumping in that because they're handing out all this money, and it's creating so much moral hazard and unintended consequences that I think we're going to be dealing with for years. I mean, just the unemployment side of things, like there's so many people getting a ton of money on unemployment right now that are maybe not going to want to go back to work so fast. I think it's just the classic thing that happens in late stage empires. They think that they can just control everything well enough to make it good, and then they try to control it, and it creates another problem. Then they try to control that problem, then it creates another problem. They try to, and it just gets so out of control to the point where the stock market is completely disconnected from reality. The Fed picks winners and losers, and it's just creates this whole shitstorm of stuff that I think we're going to have to deal with at some point. But I really want to get into your whole experience as an EMT. But before we do that, let's just quickly give everyone an update on the numbers here. There was a couple things I wanted to point out. So we're currently at 4.6 million cases. We were at 300,000 when we first started the show, so it's just multiplied. And obviously, there's a whole bunch missing and a whole bunch not being tested. And it's starting to explode in a lot of less advanced countries right now, and who knows what ability they even have to test. So official deaths were at 310,000. So that's hundreds of thousands of people have died in the past few months. And that's not even including all the people that died in China, because they pretty much just stopped counting after a while. I wouldn't be surprised if over 500,000 are dead already based on everything that I've seen. That being said, 1.8 million recovered, so that's good as well. This number that me and CJ have talked about a few times, the outcome of closed cases, this number was very high for quite a while. The deaths versus recovered, it was over 22% for a while. And me and CJ were seeing this has to go down. There's something holding it up right now. And it has gone down. So out of all of the cases that we know of that have come to a conclusion, 15% of those have resulted in death, and 85% have resulted in a recovery. So still, we still need to see that come down below 10% at some point. And I've heard Trump say, well, I actually haven't been listening to Trump too much, so maybe you guys can kind of, if you guys have heard that, you can kind of update it at all. I haven't been listening to him for like weeks now, but he was saying we would kind of stop around like 60,000 deaths, 70,000 deaths, and we are currently at 88,000. So we're going to be well past 100,000 official deaths in the next 2 weeks. And along with that, also, we have 100,000 active cases right now. So even if we saw no new cases from this point on, we would still need that million. Did I say 100,000? We have 1 million active cases. Yeah, we have 1 million active. I think I said 100,000. But so all those 1 million would still have to resolve and filter into either recovered or death. So even if it completely stopped today, we would still end up over 100,000. So that being combined with the fact that we saw 26,000 new cases yesterday in the US, I mean, it shows this is really going to be a tragic thing by the time it's all said and done. And combine that with the fact that we don't really know if this is going to slow down in summer. It really seems like it's not going to. It seems like the one thing that's really slowing this down now is the lockdowns, which, like I said, they have been fairly effective, but we're getting to the point now where we can't really keep the economy locked down. And obviously, I think all three of us agree that we do need to start looking towards some sort of reopening, because the damage to the economy is actually starting to outweigh the health risks. But also, like I said, with what I mentioned about it going away in summer, I mean, Brazil is just seeing an explosion in cases right now. They're actually catching up to us in our daily. I've been seeing 10,000 a day in Brazil for about a week now, and yesterday they had 15,000. So, and they have really hot, humid weather there, from what I know. And 15,000 cases, that means it's spreading like crazy. And I don't think they've had quite the testing. My freaking screen's not working. It won't let me see the tests per 1 million population. I can see it right here. 3,400 tests per 1 million population. Compare that to our 33,000 tests per 1 million. So on a population basis, we've done 10 times more testing than they're doing, and they're still seeing 15,000 cases a day. And so, like Ian said earlier in the show, some people are getting caught with their pants down, and there's several countries that have gotten caught with their pants down. Going over this list, Spain thought they could just ignore it. The UK thought they would be able to ignore it. Italy thought they could ignore it really on, but quickly learned that they couldn't and changed their way. Brazil thought they could ignore it. Mexico thought they could ignore it, and they're starting to catch up. They had 2,400 yesterday. So, and the one that I'm really keeping my eye on is Sweden, because we're hearing a lot of talk of how Sweden has been able to keep their economy open and kind of avoid the whole having the lockdown. And it's starting to show that may not be the best strategy. It hasn't been horrible so far. They haven't seen like massive deaths, but their deaths per population is quite a bit higher than ours right now. They have a small population, only 10 million in Sweden. So, every 100 deaths is pretty significant. They lost 117 yesterday, and their deaths per 1 million is 361. Ours is only 268, and we've had significant death here. So if Sweden continues along that path, they're going to have to close down just like the rest of us. Was there anything you guys want to add to the numbers before we jump into the EMT stuff?
My biggest concern, I mean, just even looking at the numbers, which we've talked on and touched on, and I'm sure we're blocked in Russia to begin with, but I mean, just with the amount of cases that you see in Russia, there's absolutely no possible way that it could be the third most cases out of all the countries and only have 2,400 deaths. Like, there's absolutely no way. Like, you have the UK below them with 33,000, and then you've got Spain above them with 27,000, and then you got Russia with 2,418. Like, I mean, I feel like there are specific countries like China and Russia that are manipulating their numbers slightly just to, defer the global impact that it would have on their economy. So I think that's something we need to pay attention to, because I feel like eventually Russia's going to, like, something's going to come out. Like, there's going to be an article or some sort of whistleblower, because, I mean, Russia's already had its issues to begin with, and now it's going to, turn to this, how many people are really dying there and how many cases do they really have, considering they have, a pretty significant population.
Yeah, I could totally see Russia being one to suppress the info. This whole thing is a test on every single country, and every single country has a vested interest in showing that they are the one that's handling it well, for trade and for many other reasons. They want to be the one that's like, look, we can take care of this. And if there is any country that has taken care of this well, it would be Taiwan. And for many different reasons, their population is not so divided like us. They don't have quite the same level as freedom as us, but in a way, our freedom here and our romanticization of freedom is almost turning into somewhat of a weakness. Like, people think it's a freedom here and an infringement on our freedoms to have to wear a mask, and that's just a total bastardization of this idea of freedom. Because, I mean, first of all, you could tear that to pieces saying you don't have the freedom to harm the people around you by being ignorant. And that's basically what the mask comes down to. But yet people are so attached to that idea that they're not willing to take that extra step. And in Taiwan, everyone's kind of just, they've been tracking people on their phones, doing all sorts of stuff we wouldn't allow here.
I actually heard they're starting to do that in California, but I can't confirm or deny that one.
Where they're tracking the COVID positive people on their phones and whatnot, and seeing if they're leaving their house and whatnot.
Yeah, I haven't looked too much into exactly what it's doing, but apparently it's a pretty effective thing. And with every new technology, there's possibility to use it for good and for evil. So with something like tracking people, here in the U.S., we have zero trust for our government. We're just not going to allow that. Period. Maybe in California or a state here and there, but I feel like overall, if you just tell that to the average person on the street, they're going to be like, "No, fuck you. You're not tracking me." But in China and Taiwan, they don't really have that option.
Well, what I think is kind of funny about that is, the American people are like, no, you're not going to track me. But I mean, just the other day, I went somewhere and, looked on my phone before I went there to make sure that they were open still. And, it's like, oh, you last visited here in January, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I don't think the American people realize that just because you're not aware of them necessarily tracking you, there's something that keeps tabs on you almost all the time. I mean, your phone is constantly aware of where you're at and what you're doing.
Yeah, if you have a cell phone and that's all it takes, it's because it has a GPS on it, it has maps on it, it has everything else on it. And I mean, hell, they use it to track murderers and, do criminal cases and shit like that. They bounce it off the cell phone towers and figure out exactly where they've been and stuff. So I mean, it's not new technology, and it's not even a new way of thinking when it comes down to tracking people. It's just the fact that people are now like, oh shit, they're tracking us now. We can't have that. It's like, no, they have been. This has been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, and it's just, that's a normal everyday part. I mean, granted, they generally don't look into it unless you're up to something bad, like you said, like the murderers and stuff like that. But yeah, we're constantly under surveillance. America is a surveillance country. You can't go anywhere without, cameras constantly seeing you. Sorry, I'm a huge crime junkie or whatever, and like you hear about, like, these murderers that did something, and they're like pulling ATM footage, from like down the street, and that's how they get caught and stuff. And it's like, you know, no matter where you go, there's something that sees you, knows where you're at and what you're doing, So I think it's just blissfully ignorant to it.
Yeah, and I think it is that blissfully ignorant thing because, like you said, they're tracking us already. But if they went that extra step to, I believe what they're doing in Taiwan is basically telling you what, like, if somebody that's infected has been to a store, it'll tell you if you check the app, oh, there was somebody there that's been marked infected and they have been at that store, so maybe you want to avoid that store. So it would kind of be like in your face, like, look, they're tracking you, it's right there. So it's almost like we're not protesting about being tracked, but we would protest if it was in our face.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with that, with that app or whatever that tells other people, I think honestly that's just holding people publicly accountable for going out there and, exposing other people to it and not caring about caring about other people and being selfish enough to where you're like, yeah, I'm infected, but whatever, I don't care. That's other people's problem.
Yeah, I hate the whole perspective of saying, okay, if you're at risk or if you live with somebody that's at risk, then that's up to you to stay home. We need to just open up everything else and not worry about wearing masks and whatnot. But it's like, essentially when it comes down to it, you're, even if you don't get any crazy symptoms and you're walking around, you're spreading it, and that's when you end up back with that second wave.
Yep.
Yeah, and this is kind of like, it just always comes back to our freedoms, because this is like a problem that needs to be solved with like a hive mind, like as all of us acting as one. And yet we just can't really do that here in the US, So actually what you were saying about the vulnerable population, maybe we'll touch on this article real quick. Because it's been known that children have not been in the vulnerable category, and and there's been a lot of controversy about should we open the schools or close the schools, and there's this weird secondary effect that's kicking in now called, I don't think they have a name for this disease, but according to this article, it says there's a Kawasaki-like disease affecting children, and it is caused by the coronavirus and can only be diagnosed by antibody tests, scientists confirm. Let me just go ahead and read off a couple of these points. This is something I'm just barely hearing about, and could really, I don't think it's been a huge thing yet, but it is really something to consider, because I don't think a lot of kids have been exposed to the coronavirus, but if this is true, then it could, if we did just let it be this free for all and just let them all get exposed, then there could be more of these secondary effects. It says here, exclusive Kawasaki-like disease affecting children is caused by the coronavirus. This is something they've been wondering for a while because they've actually seen this disease for a month or two now. Symptoms emerge several weeks after infection with SARS-CoV-2. Children do not test positive using lab-based PCR tests used to spot COVID-19, but they have already developed antibodies to SARS-CoV-2 virus and therefore can be diagnosed with infection using the antibody test. So basically, some kids have gotten the virus, and then later on, I think it has something to do with their immune response to it. Kind of like what you were saying before, how it can be worse the second time. And I've heard this in several different things. Like, we don't actually know if when you get the coronavirus, if you will have a full immunity to it later, or if you can have I think I've heard the term thrown around, like a cytokine storm around. I don't know if you could enlighten us a little more on that, but basically like your body overreacting the second time. Have you heard anything about that?
I personally haven't heard anything about it. The only thing I can say is that I know somebody who was tested positive for the virus and later on had an antibody test, and they had no antibodies. So I know there is at least certain strains of it that just because you get it doesn't mean that you're going to build up the tolerance to it to be able to fight it off later if you get it again.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things that we have to learn now. This has a lot of implications to herd immunity and to letting people go back to work if they have had it. We really got to figure out, does this an immunity that persists? Do you have antibodies just for like a month or two? Or like I said, is it worse the second time that you get it? There's a lot of big questions that need to be answered. It seems like the general kind of view of people is, oh yeah, once you had it, you're immune to it, but we really are not sure if that's the case. So I do want to get a lot more of your what you've seen as an EMT. So how has this whole virus actually changed your job? Are you seeing a lot of these virus cases?
I mean, for me personally, I've seen a decent handful of them. I was exposed to one of the first patients in Northwest Indiana that ended up being a fatal case. And this was so early that we weren't even wearing masks or anything else for it. And when I was exposed to it, my partner actually ended up testing positive, ended up having one of the more serious strains of it to where he was actually, pretty violently ill for a while. I've personally was fortunate enough to not get it, but I still was put into a quarantine for a while. I think the 2 weeks and whatnot. As far as how it's changed stuff for us, it's changed quite a bit. Our protocols alone have changed to where if somebody's having a respiratory problem, one of our easiest go-tos that was non-invasive and was able to really do good for people was we would put them on CPAP. And now because of COVID and due to the, how it passes, we're not able to CPAP people anymore and whatnot. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of people that, we have an easy remedy for it. That's not, sticking an intubation tube down their throat. Because a big thing with intubation for people who don't know is when you get intubated, you have to be weaned off of it. You can't just take the tube out and they start breathing on their own again. They generally get put on a ventilator, and then slowly but surely they start getting processed into using their own lungs and breathing on their own again. So you're starting to see a lot more drastic protocols having to be used. And even then, if we do have to intubate someone, we have filters that we have to put on our equipment. We have to put on extra masks. our PPE has gone up through the roof, where, you know, it used to just be gloves that we would wear in on a call. And if somebody's even remotely suspected of being COVID, we have to wear gloves, eye protection, N95 respirators, and gowns as well. So that's another large change that we've seen. A few other things that I've seen, that's kind of a shame, is that people with chronic illnesses are starting to become afraid of going to the hospitals. And so we've seen a lot of people who need to go to the hospital not going and actually passing away because of that. And, you know, that's been kind of a hard point. um, just trying to think what else has really changed. I know a lot of us are kind of fearful of it. Another one that I kind of want to touch on is nursing homes. Um, Nursing homes seem to be pretty much a breeding ground for this whole virus. It's getting to the point where you know, entire nursing homes are completely just infected and kind of getting wiped out by it. And I don't know if that's something that's being reflected in the numbers or if they're trying to cover it up, because a lot of nursing homes won't report stuff and whatnot because they don't want their numbers or their reviews to be seen as in they're not being taken care of. You
Yeah,
know,
like if you had all these elderly patients die on your hands, you know, that might look really bad for you as their caretaker.
yeah. And I mean, one thing I will say prior to COVID is nursing homes are just god awful places in general. 9 out of 10 of them are just they're bad. There's a common thing in EMS that we say is like, you know, and I don't know if this is a little too graphic or whatever, but a lot of us who have seen it and experienced it, we're like, I would rather fucking start a pistol than fucking be put in a nursing home, because the care that's there in the first place is just god awful.
I could actually even touch on that too. Like, not even. Don't worry, you didn't offend me at all, because my mom's a CNA and for an elderly care for people in hospice and whatnot, and her general outlook is the exact same. There's just such poor care, and I mean, you know, people just don't get taken care of as it is, and they just kind of get ignored and just kind of set off to the side. And I mean, even when they get sick, or they'll get sores, or, you know, certain things like that, and they'll end up just, you know, kind of like waving them off. And then, you know, months later or whatever, you know, you have family members that come visit, and they usually are the whistleblowers that say, hey, what the hell, why aren't you guys doing this? And I mean, a lot of the times my mom actually is one of the ones that's just like on the inside that's like, hey, what the hell, why wasn't this done? And I mean, she's caught abuse on a couple occasions. And but what I was going to say too is just even her job has gotten pretty extensive, to where she has to wear masks, she has to wear a face shield on top of that mask, and then have gloves and change her gloves basically through every room, as well as having her temperature taken at least 3 times a day. And I mean, she had a fever and she was out of work for, I think, 2 weeks, and, you know, got tested and whatnot and came up negative, but still had to wait until her fever was gone. So, I mean, I feel like they're somewhat, it's a good thing that they're trying to, like, I guess, protect them, but just with the way that it's a breeding ground, it's, I mean, they're not seeing it through, and that's why we're seeing such big cases.
Yeah, you know, and you know, another aspect of, you know, kind of the nursing home thing that, you know, if you just kind of think about it too, you know, even without, you know, the I guess the human variable there, you know, just it being such a special population that already have, you know, probably chronic illnesses and weakened immune systems and stuff, you know, them being in that close quarters and stuff. I mean, as soon as something gets in there, it's just going to run rampant, and that's exactly what's happening. You know, so, you know, I think it's just a bad problem made worse, if you will.
Definitely. And I mean, you've got like, I don't know exactly how they all work, but you've probably got, one nurse seeing multiple different patients, and you may not see any symptoms pop up in the young nurse, but because the elderly are more susceptible to it, it kind of just spreads to everyone. And she could, this nurse could have it for a week or two without knowing, being asymptomatic, and basically just spread it to the whole place. So it just could happen so fast. And one of the big things about this virus is it goes hidden in our population, which a lot of people would say that's like a good thing. Like a lot of people don't show symptoms, and a lot of people show very mild symptoms, and that's a good thing in one sense. But in another sense, it just makes it so easy to just spread to so many different people so fast. And in an unsusceptible population, that's kind of gonna just spread through and not show the biggest effects. But once it arrives at a place like a nursing home, then where basically everyone's susceptible, then it's going to just become much more prevalent. So in your field, have you run into any sort of like PPE shortages or any sort of issues in that category?
Oh yeah. That actually one of the biggest things, and I can't necessarily say any names or anything for fear of my job, but my company, they actually got a hold of a lot of those counterfeit N95s or KN95s that were brought over here. So for a while there, we weren't even properly protected, more than just wearing like a cloth mask or just a regular surgical mask. And because of that, we saw a surge in our people getting sick. And then, it's gone from we were wearing surgical gowns to now wearing rain ponchos. And some places have had to wear trash bags and, stuff like that. So, the shortage of supplies is definitely there.
Is that still continuing on to this day?
I mean, some of it is the N95s have come back. Like we're getting the proper ones that we had in the first place. But we're still wearing rain ponchos instead of surgical gowns.
Are you required? Because I know my mom was actually, they made her sign something that said you're required, like, to, if you have somebody to go to the store for you or go out and do anything for you, that they would go do it. And if you do go out, you're required, you have to wear a mask because they're so strict on trying to avoid the virus coming in contact with any patients or anything.
I mean, me personally, I haven't had to sign anything, but at the same time, there's like if we are exposed to a patient, we're supposed to have an exposure report that we fill out and submit it to the company. And there's been a couple times where I've been exposed to a patient and haven't even received that form. I've had to go out and find it through another coworker who had a blank copy or something.
It sounds like you've been lucky so far as to not actually catching it. You said your coworker did catch it, and both of you were there at the same time. It sounds like. How many times have you like had to been tested, and what do you think about the test in general?
I've only actually been tested once. Kind of how it works is every day we have to do a health screen prior to starting our shift, and then we do a second one at the end of our shift where we marked the typical have you come into contact with anybody without proper PPE? What's your temperature? Are you having any difficulty breathing? Are you having fevers, chills, stuff like that. So, and sorry, I'm gonna have to make you edit here. What was the question again?
I was just asking, what do you think about that? So you said you had taken one test, right? How comfortable, uncomfortable? What was that whole process like?
Oh man, the test was. I mean, from what I understand, it's not too far off from like a flu swab, but it's pretty bad. They take a pretty long, I guess, collection swab, and they shove it in your nose all the way up to your sinuses.
You're making me feel really good about this whole get tested thing.
Oh, dude, I told you it's awful. Me and my fiance had to go get it at the same time because we lived together, and I was exposed, without PPE and stuff early on. And I mean, one thing that was kind of frustrating with it is that in the earlier times when this all started, it took me longer than my quarantine to actually get my results back. So, yeah, so I mean, granted, because I wasn't going to go back to work before I knew, I had my company actually trying to make me come back prior to knowing if I was positive or not.
I gotta admit, it sounds like it's really not like a perfect system you guys got going on. I mean, just based on everything that I've heard from about the virus, you could be asymptomatic for potentially 2 weeks. So you said you've been tested one time, but you do fill out these health reports a lot. Do you think it's possible, or maybe it has happened to some degree, that somebody in the medical field has had it and just not known yet, and then could potentially be spreading around? Is that something you worry about?
Yeah, and actually, I can say, it has happened. The person that I said, had contracted it but didn't have the antibodies. That same person was asymptomatic for a little while, and while they were asymptomatic, they were continuing to go to work and stuff. And because of that, they actually ended up getting a whole station shut down, and all the crews for that town ended up having to be moved to a different station and whatnot while they were deconning it and kind of taking care of what needed to be done in order to get it back to where they felt it was safe enough for people to go back.
That's just intense. It almost sounds like a medical war zone.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. I don't know. It's been an interesting ride through all this. Definitely seen some stuff I didn't think I would have to see, and definitely saw some stuff that I found a little bit, I guess, morally unsavory, I guess, if you will. But I mean, because when you talk EMS, you have private companies, and then you also have municipalities. And private companies, they don't get as much help from the state and stuff like that because they're a business. So a lot of that is more about the money and keeping their business afloat, as opposed to taking care of, what needs to be taken care of and doing things, I guess, in, I don't want to say a proper way, but for lack of a better word, a proper way, I guess. While municipalities, they're able to kind of operate in a way that, they're not about, keeping stuff afloat, because they're going to be funded regardless, because they're funded by taxes.
Wow. I mean, I guess that makes total sense too, because those private companies are trying to push, just like a basic, any company like is trying to stay open right now and just stay afloat. So I mean, just in the sense that they have to cut whatever corners, or just avoid taking whatever precautions just to pinch that penny and keep afloat.
Yeah, and another thing for the private side that I can completely understand, if you look at it from a business mindset, with the people all not wanting to go to the hospital and stuff. I mean, the ERs were completely empty for, I mean, a couple months, and so with that, they're the transfer side where, they're just taking people home or taking people to another hospital, or, stuff like that. There was none, a lot of shifts were cut. A lot of people were sent home without, their hours for that week, and so it was getting tight, and it was getting really tough for, even the larger companies to stay afloat, because there just wasn't work.
Yeah, it's really had an interesting effect on the whole medical industry as a whole. When people think pandemic, well, something I've heard from some investors is, well, okay, let's go ahead and put money into the medical field because obviously they're going to stay really busy during this. But the way that it seems like it's kind of come through and shaking everything up, it's definitely not like a profitable thing for the medical industry. It seems like it's more kind of taking away from their profits. Like how you said the ER was empty. I would imagine a lot of those are elective surgeries or surgeries that maybe people need, but they decided maybe now is not the best time. And so it seems like they're actually making a lot less profits and having to focus more on just being the thing in society to try and take care of everyone rather than this profit mindset, which most medical companies seem to have shifted towards in the last decade, 2 decades. They seem to be more of this profit focused machine, and then now this thing has come through to where they just really need to almost be selfless and kind of give up on some money because of how much they're needed in that time.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I want to say, and I don't mean to sound, kind of like a bad person about this, but I mean, to be honest, a lot of people who go to the ER by ambulance and stuff, a lot of them don't need to go. It's stuff that you can take yourself to an urgent care for. Like, people get a twisted ankle and call an ambulance for it, and or people have like, oh, I've had a headache for the past 2 hours and I haven't taken any ibuprofen for it, but I want to go to the ER, and so that's a lot of what you get. It's not all just emergencies and traumas and stuff like that. A lot of it's just people not being educated, I would say, to where they know what to do or how to kind of take care of it at home or where to go for it. Because, an emergency room is for emergencies. Urgent care is for when, oh, I have a cough or, oh, I have the flu and stuff, And so I think a lot of people just aren't aware of that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Because, I mean, a lot of people overshoot their symptoms or something. I'm sure you get a lot of people that call just for a simple stomach ache or something like that, and ends up being gas, or that they haven't had a bowel movement or something stupid like that. It's like, obviously you're gonna have a stomach ache.
Yeah, and I don't want to downplay anybody who has anxiety, because I have it too, and I feel for them 100%. But like, you get a lot of people who call for anxiety attack and they think they're dying, and it's like, you're not dying. Like, let me sit here and I'll talk to you for a little bit. We'll get you calmed down and, you're good, but, it's just a lot of people don't, I mean, where in school are you ever taught, beyond like basic health class, or something? Where are you ever taught about like, actual medical stuff? You're just not.
Yeah. I mean, especially until it starts happening to you.
Yeah. I felt some pretty intense waves of anxiety, and sometimes, you feel like you are dying, and regardless of what anyone tells you, you feel like it. So it doesn't really matter. It's kind of just your survival instincts taking over. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing to consider. A lot of people just have this in their mind now that the hospitals are like this contagious place. So people are, I mean, I know I would probably be very resistant to go myself. So that's definitely a interesting effect that's having, especially when it comes to just being less profitable for the medical industry. But we're just about to pass an hour here. I think we'll go ahead and wrap this podcast up. There has been a lot of economic news that came through this last week that I was considering on touching on this show, but it seems we've gotten quite a bit of content just talking about the health side of this. So we'll probably go ahead and do another show sometime later this week, and I'll go ahead and touch on all this economic stuff. But I just want to thank you, Ian, for joining us. It's been an absolutely great conversation, and I just want to wish you the best of luck out there. Just be safe.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it, and thank you guys for having me. I hope I lended some insight or some knowledge to it.
Oh yeah, man, definitely. And I mean, really, really good to have you. And I mean, like we say to all of our guests, I mean, if you want to come back on, give a shout out and let us know, and we have no problem working it up. Obviously, this one was a little crazy scheduling wise, but we make it work. We get it all done.
Oh yeah, and yeah, if you guys ever want me back, just let me know. I'll definitely be more than happy to come back.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll stay in touch if you hear any crazy stories or anything. Then we would love to have you on. Or if, like we were talking about earlier, if we do see like a second wave, who knows? Things seem to be calming down right now, but according to history, we may not be through the worst of it yet. So I want to thank all of our listeners for checking us out. You can find us on Facebook at COVID Commentary SLC. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead, press thumbs up down there. Give us a subscribe. We'd love to see you next week. And yeah, hope to see all of our listeners next week.
Thanks, guys.
All right, take care, guys.